And we're back, and we're moving into our second conversation for today. We are joined by Amy Jex, the president of the Mental Health Association of Belize, and we are talking about mental health during a pandemic. And of course, there's some activities that we're going to be discussing that the association is having as well. Good morning, Amy.
Hi, good morning, Marlene. Good morning, Asani.
Good morning, Amy.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Very timely.
Yes. Well, you know, Amy, this is, I think from the onset, we were told that there would be some consequences of the pandemic that would affect people's mental health. You know, I did a story a few weeks ago talking to some people about levels of anxiety, and they're saying it's far more than they've ever seen before. Let's talk about what's happening.
Well, as you know, there are all kinds of changes happening, and every time there is a change, it causes stress for us. Yeah. And now that we don't know what's coming next, it causes even increased stress. So we have no idea how to deal with our usual stress plus all this extra stress. So it's kind of tricky.
We're looking at a situation where it's rather unprecedented that you would have this kind of a shock being experienced. We're looking at mass unemployment and the fact that people who don't have an idea where the next meal is coming from or how the next bill will be paid get into a state of depression. Have you seen cases such as this, or what can you share insofar as this particular situation where there is perhaps an increase in persons who are depressed, who perhaps are suicidal, or whatever the case may be?
Well, first I must say it's not unprecedented. There have been times in our Belizean history where we have been affected by recessions, we've been affected by weather situations. It just is now that we are a part of this global pandemic. And so now the economic impact is even larger. As you mentioned, we have a lot of losses, especially regarding economics and finances and those kinds of things with salaries, businesses, as you spoke earlier, the tourism sector. We don't know how we're going to get money in the country, but we always need to find money in order to buy the things that we do need. So when we are stressed out, it's not only the individual, it's not only the family, but we also have stressors of the entire society. It's a collective trauma of sorts, you know? So it's very important that we start looking at the entire society and how this situation is impacting us. Of course, as Marlene mentioned, there are increased levels of anxiety, and I've seen that in my clients, I've seen that in just friends, family, just how we interact with each other. We're always worried. It's a little bit harder to relax, you know, a lot more tough to just feel normal, feel like we can just have a regular day. Yeah. So definitely there are increased instances of depression, not just new cases, but people who have had mental health issues coming along. That's one of the things that we want to include as part of our Mental Health Association events later in the year. We're planning to have a new event, and as usual, we have our speech contest, and that's what we want our high school children to talk about. How people are affected, not just the larger economy, but let's say you used to have mental health issues. How are you impacted now? Are you new to having anxiety as a diagnosis? Because there are many people who could cope before. They had all their work-life balance, they had good coping skills, but with the lockdown, with the restricted economy, now it's a lot harder for these people to cope. So these are definitely things we are looking at through the Mental Health Association. And there are things that as individuals, we want to look at our day and see how we can move along and make it better.
Yeah. You know, Amy, the psychological effects of the pandemic, you rightly said, it's not just local. And I think we can look to other countries because they're sometimes a little bit ahead of us since they're, the effects of their pandemic took root earlier, that we kind of know or have an indication of what may happen. And we knew things like domestic violence was going to be an issue. They tried to get a head start on that. Child abuse was also another issue. They tried to get ahead of that. And mental health effects. We're trying to, well, I don't know if we can get ahead of it at this point. But having people with a high level anxiety is one thing. But what are some of the consequences when you have this very stressed out large part of our society? What can potentially happen from here?
As you see or you've seen in different parts of the world or even in our repeated history, you see that there is an increase of hopelessness, an increase of despair. Sometimes these go into mental health issues like depression, maybe suicidal thoughts, maybe increased rates of suicide as we have seen. But we also have increased rates of crime and increased rates of health issues as well. And not just that the pandemic is impacting us, but as you can see, the weather is impacting these things as well.
Yeah.
So we have all these stressors that just keep adding up.
Yeah. So what, I mean, you talk about the fact that these stressors they're just kind of being layered on top of each other. First you were confined to your homes, then maybe you lost some income or you lost your job. You know, you're dealing with so many different things all at once. I know that one of the concerns that people have is looking at especially the men in our population. Do you want to kind of unpack that a bit, why they are most at risk at a time like this?
We look at that population because of a few reasons. Usually men have less health-seeking behaviors. So typically men will less likely go to the doctor, or men will less likely seek out counseling when necessary. Mm-hmm. When we look at rates of suicide and rates of crime, men also have higher rates in those as well. So when you combine stressors with the things that we see men are more likely to do, it's a bad combination. So that's why it's very important not just to reach out to men, but to have resources available. Of course, we do have resources for women, we do have resources for children, we do have resources for the entire society. But in a situation like this, we really want to make sure that men know that they could seek out help, that they ought to as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a part of it is really just how we have the gender norms that we've placed on them. You know, men are supposed to be providers. When they lose income, it is a lot more devastating for them than any other population. Is that the case?
We look at it in that way as well, but it's very important to see that for the men, it's the main component of their identity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you have women can be caregivers, and that's okay, as well as providers. Women, you know, can wear a lot of hats. But if for the longest time you have seen yourself as the provider, then it's very hard for you to come up with another hat to wear all of a sudden, you know, and it kind of destroys how you see yourself. So it's not so much that it only happens to men, but it's that women have, like you said, gender roles and norms where women have worn more than one hat. And there are women who are struggling with the identity issue as well. For example, I've worked with many women who are full-time workers and they're full-time moms, and transitioning full-time into the home has just been difficult for them as well. Yeah. So it's kind of affecting each person in a different way. And that's why it's important to look at it as the collective, as our society. We have been traumatized. You know, in the past, there have been fires that we still talk about. There are hurricanes that we talk about 50 years later. And we do have a history of collective trauma. And this will be one more of those things.
Are there warning signs that we need to look out for our loved ones? I mean, because you're saying it, and we've all felt it. We've all been, you know, tired of COVID at somewhere or the other, or worried, or you know, maybe a little bit sad at the loss of the life we had pre-COVID. So we all have different feelings that are going on, but we don't know how bad any one person is being affected. Should we be looking out for warning signs of a crisis situation from loved ones?
Definitely. There are definitely signs of grief that we are all going through, like you rightly mentioned. Whenever we experience a loss, we experience grief reactions, you know. Even when you lose your phone or your contacts, that happens to you. So right now we are experiencing loss of a routine. We're experiencing loss of our plans. Many of us came into 2020 with these huge plans of how we want to change our lives. And so we are all grieving those little things, you know, the graduations, the birthday celebrations, the trips, the little things. But some of us have been grieving not being able to go to the funeral of a loved one. Some of us have been grieving different roles that we've had. And so, yes, many of us will show grief symptoms. So maybe we might be a little bit more withdrawn. We will have changes in our mood, things like that. But definitely when you want to get in touch with a professional, or you want to see that whenever you see a major change in a personality, but definitely when you see any signs of addiction, needing alcohol, cigarettes, sleeping pills in order to relax, maybe the person is spending too much time on the phone or on video games, when you have trouble concentrating and remembering things, whenever you notice changes in sleep and appetite, it's super important to reach out to that person and see what is happening. Any unexplained health problem, maybe you're having a lot of stomach issues all of a sudden, maybe you have headaches, maybe your body is just cramped up and in pain all over. Maybe you're just feeling more tired than usual. Maybe you notice these things in a family member. Maybe you've noticed in a friend who's become more withdrawn. So it's important to start that conversation. It's not always going to be the case where that person will go to counseling instantly, but it is usually very important to just start that conversation just in case. And like you pointed out, we all, especially the men, need to be the strong person in the family. We all have these roles that we still need to take on, but it's very important to acknowledge where we are.
Well, here's an interesting observation, Amy, and perhaps this would require some weighing from the National Drug Abuse Control Council, but it's an observation nonetheless. During this entire COVID experience, as much as Belizeans are a culture of drinkers, so to speak, you've seen a spike in the consumption of alcohol over the past few months for several reasons. And it's not because we're in festive times, it's perhaps because people are using alcohol to self-medicate for issues relating to joblessness or the overall economic situation that has befallen them. Can you, from your point of view, speak on something like that?
Well, it's something that we've done for a long time, not just as a society, but we've learned that substances kind of help us to sleep and to feel normal. You know, it's something that I do individually. Drink, I feel more relaxed. So we've taken that, and that's how we've been reacting, or that's how we've been coping with our current stressors. So if I'm stressed out because all day I have nothing to do, I want to relax a little bit, what will I do? Well, I want to take a drink because that's what I've always done, you know? And it's very important to notice that we do have this culture of drinking. That's how we party. Our culture is food and alcohol, you know? So whenever there's something important, we tend to eat unhealthy foods and we tend to drink alcohol. That's our go-to feel better reaction. So it's important to take a look at yourself. Like I mentioned, if you feel you're having this tendency to rely on substances, so if you are taking a drink every day in order to feel normal, if you are taking a drink every day in order to sleep, it's not necessarily working the way you want it, but also you want to notice that you're becoming reliant on it. It may not be alcohol or substance abuse, but it is a psychological dependence that you are having on, you know, because you're like, well, I need to relax. What will I do? So we have to develop different kinds of coping skills. And when you look at them, they have to be protective. alcohol isn't always protective. So it's very much important to find a coping skill that will protect you from other things.
And you see,
It
the
has-
thing is, too,
uh-huh.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Go
off, but I
ahead.
think it's an important point to add in. While we think very often that alcohol relaxes us, oftentimes because it reduces our inhibitions, it can cause more problems.
Definitely.
From domestic abuse to many different crimes. The police always talk about alcohol being a key factor in violent crime as well.
Yes.
So, I don't know if we have statistics. I haven't heard anything from the Drug Abuse Council if we're seeing an increase in substance use or in alcohol consumption. But it would be a fair guess, I think, to say yes.
And we are all drinking alone a lot more often to cope with our stressors. So it's very important for us to start realizing we have to step away, because alcohol in the long run is not just taking money out of your pocket, which is why, the reason why the bars were closed down, the restaurants were closed down, because we want to take those measures of austerity and use the money where we need it. But also it's leading to those other issues where you're not yourself around your loved ones.
Yeah.
So it's very tricky. And apart from that, it takes a toll on your health.
Yeah.
So if you're drinking a lot, you might end up having kidney issues, maybe not today, but in the long term. You also develop negative habits. So instead of enjoying yourself with your family, with your kids, you tend to isolate and drink by yourself. And so those create different dynamics that we really don't want to continue on.
So let's get some advice. Let's offer some tips to people. You outlined, I think, some emotions that we're all going through. So I think we're all collectively grieving. But what are some ways to be able to cope with it? This uncertainty isn't easy, Amy. I don't think for anyone.
The thing is, we have to be understanding that the uncertainty won't end. That's going to be one of the first things right now. We are in the middle of the COVID pandemic. We may not feel it in Belize the way other cities or countries in the world are feeling it, but we are still in the middle of it because of all of this economic impact, the fact that as a small country, we won't be able to grow without the help of other countries. So we will continue feeling the impact over the next few months, maybe over the next year or so. So one of the first things we have to understand is that we're still in the middle of it. Now that we're in the middle of it and we know things will not get immediately better in the next month, even if we were to make changes, there's always pros and cons to every choice that we make. But the point is, we're still in flux. We're still changing. So the most important thing to remember is we are resilient. We will deal with things in a bad way, but we can bounce back. We can come back because we learn to adapt to the things that we need. So first, then, you have to identify what your needs are. You really want to identify what you do have. What are your strengths? Having a positive view of who you are and the things that you can do. Making realistic plans, carrying those things out. You really want to make sure that you're not planning ahead for things that you won't be able to control. A lot of what this negative comes from, the depression, the anxiety, is experiencing a loss of control. We have fear, we have hopelessness. So we want to know, what can I do? And then how can I manage my feelings? Very often, we feel like we should not be angry, we should not be sad, we should get rid of the negative feelings, but they are here for a reason. And so we have to acknowledge them and build on that and grow from them. Have a sense of purpose, that's very important. Having that sense of purpose, I need to get this done, because that's when we feel productive, that's when we can get through our day. When we have no sense of purpose, we tend to get into the bad habits. We play video games all day. We drink alcohol. We overeat. So having that sense of purpose is important. Having a support network is invaluable. Yeah. Very often we feel like maybe I can't trust this person, or I have to do this on my own. But having that support network makes the load lighter.
Yeah.
And finally, having gratitude.
Gratitude.
Yeah. And of course, one of the things we always tell people is that they can get help if they feel that they don't have a supportive network anywhere.
Yes.
Amy, what are some of the places that people can access counseling services? There's some that are free and some that you can pay for.
Definitely. If you go to any of the polyhealth clinics, you will be able to access the psychiatric nurse practitioners. Here in Belize City and in Belmopan, in Belize City, there's a counselor as well. We also have, for services that you would like to pay, there are private counselors throughout the country. A few you can find through Mind Health Connect. If you can call the private hospitals, very often they can help you to find a counselor. I'm at Belize Medical Associates. The different private clinics also have as well. So those are the first two resources. Also, we have to remember that there is a very active school counselors association in high school and primary school. So if that's a resource that you can reach out to, you could access them as well. And through the Department of Human Services, you have the counselors and the social workers where you can get help as well. Excellent. So there are a lot of places that you can go for help. If you want to talk, turn to a counselor if you feel like there is no one that you can turn to in your family. Very often we still turn to the churches, to our church leaders and church elders. Those are very good, important sources. They usually have resources as well to help us along. A lot of us feel betrayed by our workplaces at this point, so that's not a place that we would like to go to. But a lot of us do have human resource departments. Many of them have employee assistance programs, and they can go to them. Civil servants can reach out to the Ministry of Public Service, and they have a very well-rounded employee assistance program as well.
Okay. All right. And before we close off, let's get in what's happening with the Mental Health Association. You guys have an AGM coming up?
Yes, on Wednesday, and please, I'm inviting everyone to join us. We are having it on Zoom, but contact the Mental Health Association at 202-2511 or email at mentalhealthassociation@gmail.com. We want everyone who's interested in mental health to join us. We'll have a brief presentation on decreasing stigma and discrimination, but it's only going to be an hour or so to get through. We have this AGM where we'll discuss our plans for the future. We have a lot of stuff that we want to continue. Of course, COVID changed our plan already, but as the resilient group that we are as Belizeans, we're already planning how to address it. For example, our speech contest, we're adapting that to see how we can get video submissions. Yeah. Our Sleep It Out, that's something we're still working on, but the Welcome Resource Center really uses that as a platform to talk about hopelessness in our country. So for the homeless population, we had to work with the Mental Health Association and the Welcome Resource Center in Belize City. We work with the homeless population along with other government and GOs in order to facilitate a place for the homeless population as well. Yeah. And of course, as usual, the Welcome Resource Center is always expecting, we have a clothing drive because the Welcome Resource Center offers a shower and food to the people of this population on a daily basis. We right now need men's clothing, so if you have any men's clothing that you've been cleaning out your closet in this downtime, please drop it off at the corner of Tebruce and Vernon Streets in Belize City. Again, their number is 202-2511, or you can always email. And if you do want to join us on the Zoom meeting, we will ask you for just general information, what you're interested in mental health, your name, your organization if necessary. Yeah. But if you have an interest in mental health, please join us for our AGM and join our community so that we can grow and make a bigger impact. And especially in this time where we're seeing all these social inequities and injustice, the Mental Health Association is here to advocate for the marginalized and the stigmatized, especially those coping with coping with mental health.
All right. Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining us this morning and reminding us that we are all going through this together, but most importantly, we do have to pay attention to our friends or families or co-workers and make sure we can help people who may need a little bit more help getting through it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, you too.